2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire seemed unstoppable. Rome had conquered much of Europe and was sending its legions beyond the Eastern Mediterranean to the Middle East, gateway to the riches of Asia. But a journey to the east could become a road of blood. In 53 BCE, near the Mesopotamian town of Carrhae, the Parthians, an empire blending Persian and Greek cultures, confronted a Roman army. The outcome of the battle seemed beyond doubt. Some 40,000 Romans faced only 10,000 Parthians. And Rome's legions were Europe's finest foot soldiers. There was just one problem. The Parthian army didn't fight on foot.
The Parthians, they were cavalry, they were horse archers. Versatile, rode like the wind. What the Romans did was what the Romans always did. They took a fixed position. They were ordered into a hollow square, defending all sides. But that was nothing to the Parthian horse archers because they could just ride around them, and they did. They galloped around and around and around and around, shooting as they went.
Some 30,000 Romans were killed or captured. It was one of Rome's worst military defeats. But it may have been something else as well. A Roman historian wrote that the Parthians dazzled the Romans with banners made of a beautiful fabric, silk. That may only be a legend. But around the time of Carrhae, Romans began coveting Chinese silk. And China began selling silk to Rome in exchange for fine Roman glassware and gold. Inspiring the name we give Eurasian trade today. The Silk Road. But long before Romans and Parthians fought at Carrhae, trade between the peoples of Eurasia was shaping lives, making new things possible, and changing the world. At Carrhae, the Parthians won with a style of warfare that had evolved centuries earlier and thousands of kilometers away, on the steppes of Central Asia. The domestication of the horse was the first step towards cavalry warfare, but the second step would be a long time coming.
The earliest evidence for the recurved bow is in Shang Dynasty China, probably dated between 1300 and 1100 BC. A bow is as strong as it is long. It derives its strength from its length. And the recurved bow packs the same length into this very short bow that can be swung over the horse's rear and over the horse's neck. And it was much, much easier to use on horseback. And the recurved bows are technologically quite difficult to make. It took a long time to develop the craft of bow making to that point.
The recurve are all these sinewy bends, reflex and deflex. That gives it inbuilt spring. But that can only be created with composite materials. What we mean by that is it's made of a number of materials. The heart of it is wood, usually beech, and then you have horn from the water buffalo, and then sinew, the tendons of an animal. That, when you bash it, you can tease apart and get these very fine fibers with tremendous tensile strength. That has elasticity and spring, and it stops the bow bursting apart. These are all materials that enhance the power, the spring of the bow.
A recurved bow gave a horse archer unprecedented killing power. But it didn't make him a cavalryman. Before horse archers could fight as an effective military force, they needed a large supply of identical arrows, and that didn't exist.
One of the technological innovations was the invention of the socketed arrowhead. They were made of bronze, usually, and they were made in a mold and cast in a mold so that an infinite number of socketed arrowheads of the same weight could be made from the same mold.
Archaeologists believe that sometime in the 2nd millennium BCE, socketed bronze arrowheads began spreading east, while the composite recurved bow spread west. Sometime around 900 BCE, socketed arrowheads and recurved bows met in the Tarim Basin area of Central Asia. Brought together by traders, warriors, and migrating nomads.
After about 700 BC, you begin to see really thousands and thousands of arrowheads and dozens of arrowheads in a single quiver in a grave. It's like they're being mass-produced.
Bronze socketed arrowheads turned Central Asia into an arsenal. But cavalry still couldn't exist until warriors could become soldiers.
It was really the age of heroic warfare. Individuals going out and doing great deeds by themselves and attracting glory for their own name. And this is the kind of warfare that's described in the Iliad and the Odyssey, or in the Rig Veda, religious text that's at the deep roots of modern Hinduism. What had to change was the psychological change in the nature of the warrior. It had to change from individuals to units working under the command of a commanding general who would attack and retreat upon command.
While recurved bows were spreading west and socketed arrowheads were spreading east, the concept of military discipline was spreading north. Sometime around 900 BCE, all three combined in the heart of Central Asia.
When those three things came together, cavalry became a really deadly form of military force.
A force that would severely test the ancient world's most powerful armies. 2,000 years ago, as the Romans pushed east to expand their empire, China was pushing west. And like the Romans, the Chinese encountered a formidable enemy on horseback. The Xiongnu were nomads from the Central Asian steppes. Armed with recurved bows and socketed arrows, they fought under commanders as a disciplined military force. They raided Chinese villages and plundered the growing trade between East and West. And no one could stop them.
Imagine you're a villager in China and these men come from nowhere. They come from over the hill without warning, tearing into your village. They shoot the headman, they shoot your husband, they chase the women out. There is no hiding place. In a flurry of dust and arrows, they're in and they're out and they take the stuff and they go.
To beat the Xiongnu, the Chinese needed soldiers who could fight like them. Chinese cavalry became experts at shooting the recurved composite bow. And a lethal Chinese weapon, the crossbow. Chinese cavalry defeated the nomads. And China seized new territories in the steppes, pacifying trade routes and opening new horizons. During the Roman Empire, Silk Road trade flourished as Chinese, Persian, and Kushan armies kept the trade routes open across Eurasia. China had leveled the battlefield with nomad raiders from the steppes. But Central Asian horse archers were about to carve their names on history. In the 4th century CE, Europe was invaded by a Central Asian people whose name still evokes barbaric cruelty. The Huns, who fought their way west all the way to Rome. European peoples like the Goths and Visigoths, the so-called barbarians, fled before their onslaught and sought refuge in Roman territory. When the Huns withdrew from the Roman world, those barbarian refugees stayed. And the rest is history. The Western Roman Empire was plunged into chaos. As barbarian tribes, dissatisfied with their lot, rebelled against Roman authority, and weak Roman emperors failed to crush them. As Rome declined, migrating horse archers called the Avars carved their own country out of Eastern Europe, bringing with them another Asian military innovation: the stirrup. This Chinese statue from the 4th century CE is the earliest known depiction of stirrups.
Stirrups made it possible to use long swords and lances as shock weapons against stationary targets and keep your seat. And of course, that made it possible to have really heavy mounted warriors.
This was the age of the medieval knight.
A medieval knight's power came from combining the Asian stirrup and the ancient shock tactics of the Persian cataphract with a European invention: articulated plate armor. Strong enough to protect the wearer from sword and lance thrusts, while light enough to allow him to move freely on horseback and on foot. Heavy cavalry had never been a more potent weapon of war. But even Europe's formidable mounted knights would be outfought by Central Asian cavalry that burst out of the steppes and changed the world.
The largest conquest empire that the Earth has ever seen was created by pastoral nomads from Central Asia.
In the 13th century, the Mongols conquered as far west as Poland and as far east as the Sea of Japan. The Mongols have gone down in history as bloodthirsty killers, but they were also sophisticated, open-minded, often generous conquerors. They pacified the Silk Road. Trade between West and East flourished under this Mongol-enforced peace, the Pax Mongolica. Europeans began traveling east as never before. Merchants, missionaries, and diplomats flowed east along the trade routes, bringing back popular Asian goods like cloth and spices, and tales of the wealth and wonders of the East. Some true, some fabulous, but all fascinating. From Europe to China, Silk Road trade spread new knowledge of faraway lands.
The Silk Road made human beings realize that there are other people out there, and it opened the eyes of the East and the West.
The Italian cities of Venice and Genoa reaped huge rewards. Their merchants traveled safely throughout Eurasia and founded trading posts on the Black Sea to receive and pass on Silk Road goods. Their Silk Road profits funded magnificent art and architecture. But their competition frequently plunged them into war with one another. In one of these wars, Genoa captured a prosperous Venetian merchant named Marco Polo. Imprisoned by the Genoese, Polo dictated the story of his Silk Road journey to China to a fellow prisoner. Today, experts debate whether Marco Polo really visited China or was simply retelling stories he'd heard from fellow Silk Road travelers. But there's no debate that the travels of Marco Polo was one of the most influential books in all of human history. It tantalized Europe with tales of China's immense wealth and advanced civilization. And years before Marco Polo was telling those tales in a Genoese prison, a Chinese invention was making its way across Eurasia to the west. Something created centuries earlier, when an experiment ended very badly. Ancient Chinese alchemists prepared potions of lead or mercury for their aristocratic patrons, who believed that drinking these metals would help them live forever. Instead, those concoctions killed them or made them insane. Another deadly combination was sulfur heated with an organic nitrate found in soil throughout China, known today as saltpeter. When alchemists experimented with this formula, it burst into flame, injuring the alchemists and burning down their laboratory. From that disaster was born a chemical mixture like none other. It may have failed as an elixir of immortality, but it would prove to be a potent agent of death. This Chinese Buddhist scroll, dating from around 950 CE, depicts demons surrounding a seated Buddha. One demon holds what the Chinese called a huochang, or fire lance. It's the earliest known image of a weapon powered by that deadly mixture of saltpeter and sulfur. Known to history as gunpowder.
Noise like that would have been unprecedented to the soldiers on the battlefield. Nothing in their lives could have prepared them for a bang of that size, and accompanied by smoke and acrid sulfur smell which would hang in the air. The impact of which, of course, they couldn't see until men around them dropped. Not even professional soldiers would have experienced anything like this before in their lives. That would have been terrifying. And it's no wonder that they scattered and ran.
The Battle of Carrhae has gone down in history as one of the earliest uses of gunpowder weapons on a European battlefield. Some 500 years after it burned down a Chinese alchemist's workshop, gunpowder had become destiny's weapon of choice. After Carrhae, it was only a matter of time until the fates of peoples and nations were decided by the gun. Within 2 centuries, Europeans would use their powerful gunpowder weapons to dominate the world, creating empires that would evolve into today's global trading culture, which binds people together by commerce instead of the gun. But before Europe could embark on its empire-building adventure, its medieval social order would be shattered by a catastrophic event: the Black Death. In just under a decade, from 1347 to 1356, the Black Death killed at least 25 million Europeans, 1/3 of Europe's population. Most scholars now agree that the Black Death originated in Central Asia, and that it first reached Europe on Italian merchant ships returning from the East. The Black Death killed with incredible speed. Victims had only a week to a few hours to live. Entire towns and monasteries were wiped out, and no one knew what to do.
They believed that bad vapors were coming up from the ground, making people ill, affecting their humors. They believed that a strong southerly wind was a bad thing that made a lot of people ill. That it was a combination of the alignments of the planets, because they believed in astrology and its effect on your risk of disease. They really didn't have a structured medical approach to how to deal with it. It took everyone off guard. No one knew how to deal with it.
Physicians tried to stop the Black Death, When traditional theories of disease failed, they resorted to studying the disease itself. They were desperate to understand what was causing the Black Death, how it spread, and how to treat it. Slowly, they found answers.
They tried various treatments, but no medicines had any effect. But that's why they moved over time to trying to restrict the contact of people, burning the clothes of people that had died rather than giving them to other people. And they realized that the clothes and spread of people was an important way they could stop the spread of disease. So we have the introduction of the concept of quarantine, where people weren't allowed to move from one area to another if there was a plague outbreak. And also that when sailors and ships arrived in a port, they may have to stay in a quarantined area for a certain number of days until they were found to be clear of the disease, and then they could move inland and actually go into town.
Over time, this new trial and error approach would spawn a medical revolution. Some 200 years after the Black Death, the brilliant physician Andreas Vesalius published meticulous studies of the human body that exploded ancient and medieval theories and gave birth to modern anatomy. Europe's battle against the Black Death taught lessons that helped create modern medicine. Those who did survive led better lives, as the greatest horror of their age gave way to a new era. The Black Death had decimated Europe's workforce. Desperate for labor, the nobility had to compete for surviving workers by offering higher wages.
Over the next few centuries, we see a complete rebalancing in the population. So the poor, hungry farmers who didn't have enough land were suddenly in a different position. If the farmers around them had died, their income could go up because they could farm much more land. And so there was less poverty and famine among the farmers.
Opportunities increased due to the shortage of workers. Women could now be scribes and hold other jobs formerly reserved for men.
The fact that we then had fewer people able to do manual labor means that not only did the price of their labor go up, so they then had better income, it also means that there seems to have been a number of inventions made specifically for labor-saving devices. We find the introduction of the spinning wheel, we find horizontal looms, we find filling mills, we've had blast furnaces, mechanized tools, and we have three-masted ships that could hold a lot more cargo for only a small number more sailors. So it's a much more efficient way of trade. So over the next 200 years or so, we see big improvements in mechanization, and the fact that fewer people around meant that these things may have been invented because of the shortage of people following the Black Death.